What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. So I just saw Aries Spears on Vlad TV maybe 40 minutes ago. Um, they were talking about Tony Rock, and Aries Spears feels that Tony Rock is funnier than Chris Rock, right? And Vlad was just shocked and appalled that he said that. But I understand perfectly fine what Aries Spears is saying when he says Tony is funnier than Chris. What it is that Chris is a better comedy writer. He's a better comedian on stage, like a crossover comedian. But Tony is more naturally funny to me. You know what I mean? His comedy is centered in blackness more than Chris Rock's comedy is. Tony Rock's comedy is more centered in blackness. Even in general, man, Tony comes across a lot smoother to black audiences, much more than Chris to me. You know what I mean? Especially young black folks. Tony just seems he's more palatable to black folks in his comedy style. You know what I mean? And Chris's comedy, I mean, I'm not saying that Chris Rock don't make black folks laugh, because he does. He's had great comedy specials, you know, Bring the Pain, Bigger and Blacker, all of that. He's had comedy specials that have made black folks laugh for sure. But there comes across, it's times where Chris's comedy comes across as, I'm black, but I'm not that type of black. That type of aura. And he even had a joke, like, I'm black. Like, you remember when he did the black people versus N-words? He did that whole thing, that whole spiel, and it was funny then. But when you think about Chris's aura, it kind of can come across like that. You know what I mean? I'm black, but I'm not those type of blacks. Tony doesn't have that type of, that air about him. Like, oh, you know, I'm above those type of black folks. Tony seemed like a black man to meet black folks wherever they at. You know what I mean? And he seems more of the fray, of the people, than Chris is. And maybe it's because Chris has spent a large amount of his life being in the upper echelon of comedy, having crossover success, crossover appeal, where white folks love him and adore him. And Tony got into comedy much later. Him being Chris Rock's younger brother, he had to find his own way in his own niche. You know what I mean? And so he knows where his audience is, and it's really rooted a lot. I mean, I'm sure a lot of white folks find Tony Rock funny, but I'm sure he knows that his comedy is very palatable to black folks for real. And in general, in Tony's aura, he has that je ne sais quoi, that aura that black folks grow up around in the hood, more than Chris does. You know what I mean? And so he can tell stories in a way and use words and use phrases that's more relatable to the black American public than Chris can at times. Even though they from the same household, same neighborhood, all of that, Tony will tell you he's cooler than Chris, cooler, flyer than Chris in certain ways. And I think sometimes it spills over in comedy. When he's saying cooler and flyer, I think he knows he is more rooted in that, in Brooklyn culture, in Bed-Stuy culture, probably in black culture for real, a little bit more than Chris is. And I'm not trying to put the brothers against each other and all of that. I'm just saying I understand what Aries Spears is saying when he says he finds Tony funnier. You know what I mean? Because Chris has a crossover comedy style that is more palatable to white folks at times. Let's be for real. It is. Even Chris's vibe and energy is more palatable to them than Tony's. I'm not saying white folks wouldn't feel comfortable around Tony, or they would, you know, feel like, oh my God, I'm scared of him at all. But y'all know what I'm saying. Chris has the energy where he would allow a white man that he's cool with to say the N-word. I'm sorry. And I think Chris, I don't find a lot of Chris's recent stuff like that funny. And I know what black folks mean when they say they don't find Chris Rock funny. I understand what they're saying. I found Chris funny, very funny at times. I really do. I love, like, what's that movie? I Think I Love My Wife. One of my favorite movies. I love that movie, right? I found Chris funny in movies. I really do. I think he's a funny guy for sure. But yeah, man, like, we seen him allow Louis C.K. to say the N-word, and Jerry Seinfeld had to check Louis C.K. about it, and Chris just laughed along. Chris Rock just laughed along with it when Louis C.K. was saying the N-word and all of that. And I don't care, y'all don't come bringing me to Louis C.K. is Mexican, because Listen, the brother looks like a white American man, and even if he is Mexican, he still shouldn't be saying the N word regardless. And y'all know how I feel about non-black people saying that word in general. And then even if he's Mexican, still he's a white Mexican. He's half Mexican, half white, and all that. You know. So anyway, yeah, I think Chris is mainstream funny, but Tony is hood funny. Black American funny, like every around the way type funny. Like in a conversation, Tony would say some stuff that's just like he is hood funny. It'll have you dying laughing in regular conversation, just talking. You probably be knees buckling laughing at stuff he's saying because he just says it in a way that's relatable and palatable for black folks and the black experience that we grow up in. Chris, his comedy is like, yeah, it's more crossover type comedy, crossover appeal. I'm not saying the brother's Wayne Brady. Wayne Brady makes Brian Gumble look like Malcolm X. I'm not saying Chris is Wayne Brady. I'm just saying Chris has a lot of crossover type of comedy appeal versus Tony having a hood appeal. And when I say hood, I'm not meaning ignorant. I'm not meaning like just outright degenerate, none of that stuff. But y'all know we have a different culture in Black America across us, and certain things are relatable in our culture, like certain even words, phrases, the way you the walk, the bop in your step when you walk, the aura that you have, the way you come across, it's just the way we talk. Tony comes across like the everyday black man that we grew up around every day in the neighborhood. Chris comes across as the black dude who was, I'm black, but I'm not that type of black type of guy. You know what I mean? He comes across as a black dude who, once he got his money and he went straight, he left the hood, but he stayed hanging out with the elites. He wasn't really hanging out with the common everyday black man no more once he got his money. Tony Rock still hang out with the common black man. That's what I'm saying.